I learned something important at 72. Warnings don't arrive with explanations. They arrive with urgency. And if you hesitate, you pay for it. A week before my daughter's wedding, I walked into a restaurant thinking about table placements and chicken versus fish. I walked out knowing my family would never be the same. Before I tell you what I saw, let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone simply because they shared your blood? Most people do. Most people regret it later. I'm Beatrice Montgomery. I raised 2 children, buried a good husband, and built a life steady enough to survive storms. I thought I knew my family. I was wrong. My daughter, Leanne, was 7 days away from becoming a bride. She's always been gentle. The kind of girl who apologizes when others bump into her. She believes effort fixes everything and love makes people honest. That belief made her easy to mislead. My son, Gideon, was different. Loud confidence. Big plans. Always chasing the next deal. People called him driven. I called him restless. He'd recently partnered with Leanne's fiancé, Preston, a man polished enough to charm bankers and quiet enough to avoid real questions. The Thorns had money, or at least the look of it. Old estates, practiced manners, smiles trained in front of mirrors. Preston played the role well. Leanne adored him. Gideon admired him. I watched him. That afternoon, I went to the Copper Whisk to confirm details for the rehearsal dinner. The place was upscale, controlled, and normally predictable. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not dramatic. Just off. Like a room where a conversation stops too quickly. Before I reached the manager's desk, a waitress I barely recognized blocked my path. Young. Pale. Hands shaking. She didn't smile. "Mrs. Montgomery," she said quietly. "Please don't go any further." I told her she must be mistaken. She leaned closer. Her voice dropped so low I barely heard it. "Hide behind the divider near the service hall," she whispered. "Watch. I can't explain. Please trust me." I didn't move. She swallowed hard. 5 minutes, she said. That's all. Right there, I had a choice. Ignore a stranger and walk into comfort. Or listen and risk hearing something I couldn't forget. This is where most people fail. They choose comfort. If you're watching this and you think warnings always come with proof, you're already behind. Subscribe now. One day, you'll wish you listened sooner. I followed her. The divider was tall, velvet, and close to the banquet suite. I stood still, heart steady, breath shallow. Years of motherhood train you to stay quiet when something matters. The door opened. I recognized my son's laugh before I saw him. Gideon walked in first. Relaxed. Confident. Behind him came Preston, loosening his cufflinks like a man finishing a job, not planning a wedding. They didn't notice me. They didn't need to. They thought the room was empty. What they talked about had nothing to do with menus. Nothing to do with love. Nothing to do with my daughter's happiness. And as I stood there listening, I realized something painful and clarifying. I hadn't raised one careless child. I had raised one trusting daughter. And one son who knew exactly what he was doing. Before I continue, ask yourself, if a stranger warned you like that, would you hide? Or would you walk away and hope for the best? If stories like this unsettle you, that's the point. Like this video. Share it with someone who trusts too easily. And subscribe, because some lessons arrive only once, and missing them costs more than pride. Would you have trusted the waitress? The door closed behind them with a soft click, the kind you barely notice unless you're already holding your breath. I stayed still. The divider hid my body, not my ears. Gideon spoke first. We don't have long. The staff rotates soon. Preston laughed quietly, not the warm laugh he used around Leanne. This one was clipped, careless. Relax. This place is paid to look the other way. I pressed my fingers into the fabric to steady myself. You bring the papers? Preston asked. Gideon slid something across the table. I heard the scrape of cardboard. Everything's signed except the last transfer. Once the license is filed, her trust folds straight into the holding company. Clean. Automatic. My stomach tightened. Preston exhaled slowly. God, your sister makes this easy. That sentence landed harder than anything else. She trusts me, Gideon continued. And she trusts you. That's the trick. Marriage does the work without us lifting a finger. So once she's officially my wife, Preston said, the gallery becomes leverage. Loans clear. We dissolve the company. Walk. 3 million each, Gideon replied. Plus the house stays tied to her name. If anything collapses, the debt points back to her. Preston whistled softly. And she'll never even understand what happened. I felt heat rise into my chest, sharp and immediate. Preston leaned back. You know what I admire about her? She still believes people mean what they say. Gideon chuckled. She always did. Mom taught her loyalty, didn't teach her caution. There it was. My name, spoken like a weakness. Preston lowered his voice. And your mother? Gideon scoffed. She's 72. She worries about flowers and seating charts. She won't see a thing until it's done. My ears rang. And if she does? Preston asked. Gideon paused, then shrugged. She'll be upset. She'll write a check. She always cleans up messes. That's what mothers do. I swallowed hard. Not from pain, from clarity. Preston set his glass down. About the lease. It's already moved. To Way? Gideon asked. My girlfriend's LLC, Preston replied easily. Safer that way. Leanne thinks the gallery is her dream. In reality, it's a shell. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet break, like wood splitting along a fault you didn't know was there. Does she suspect anything? Gideon asked. She suspects love, Preston said. That's enough. They both laughed. My hands trembled. Not from fear. From restraint. Gideon continued, once everything settles, we let the marriage fail naturally. No noise. No blame. She'll move back home. Mom will take care of her. Preston smirked. And we move on funded. Yes, Gideon said. Before Mom decides to lock things down. She's been talking about charities lately. Legacy nonsense. He said it with irritation. As if the word offended him. I won't let her give away what should be mine, Gideon added. I earned this. Earned. I raised him. I paid his tuition. I backed his first business. I forgave his failures. And standing there, hidden like furniture, I realized he didn't see support. He saw delay. Preston stood. Then let's finalize it. Paper shuffled. Pens clicked. Every signature sounded loud to me. As they stood to leave, Gideon said one last thing, careless and sharp. Honestly, she should be grateful. Most women her age don't get this kind of exit. I closed my eyes. Something inside me went cold. Not cruel, not wild. Focused. They left through the main door. Their footsteps faded. The room felt larger, emptier, changed. I didn't move right away. I needed to understand something first. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intent. If you're watching this and thinking betrayal comes from strangers, you're wrong. It usually comes from the people who know where you keep your keys. Most betrayals wear familiar faces. Subscribe. I stepped out from behind the divider as the waitress returned. She took one look at my face and didn't speak. In that moment, I stopped being a mother waiting to fix things. I became a woman deciding what would happen next. Tell me, who betrayed her more? Her brother? Or the man she planned to marry? The girl didn't rush me. That mattered. She stood there, hands folded tight in front of her apron, waiting for me to speak first. Most people fill silence when they're nervous. Macy didn't. She watched me like someone who understood that words, once spoken, can't be taken back. I heard everything, I said quietly. She nodded. I know. You could lose your job for this. She nodded again. I already decided that. There it was. Not courage made of speeches. Courage made of choice. They've been meeting here for weeks, she said. Always the same room. Always after lunch. I didn't understand at first. Then I heard your daughter's name. I studied her face. No excitement. No hunger for drama. Just a young woman who refused to look away. Why warn me? I asked. She hesitated. Because no one warned my mother. That was all she said. It was enough. She led me down a narrow hallway past swinging doors and into a cramped office that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A small monitor glowed on the desk. The banquet room appeared on screen from several angles. Clear. Sharp. Unforgiving. The cameras record audio, Macy said. Management keeps it that way. I leaned closer. On the screen, I saw Gideon's hand slide the envelope across the table. I saw Preston lean back, relaxed, careless. I heard every word again, clearer this time. Slower. Worse. My stomach didn't turn. My pulse didn't spike. That scared me more than panic would have. Can you copy it? I asked. Yes, she said immediately. I already did. Twice. Smart girl. She handed me 2 small drives. They felt heavier than they looked. This stays between us, she said. I met her eyes. Not for long. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not fresher. Sharper. Like the moment before you make a cut you can't undo. I didn't drive home. I drove past it. My hands were steady on the wheel. I wasn't avoiding my daughter. I was protecting her. That distinction mattered. If I told Leanne what I'd heard, she would confront Preston. He would deny it. Gideon would step in. They would close ranks. Evidence would vanish. Lies would harden. And my daughter would still marry a man who knew how to perform remorse. No. Emotion would ruin this. At home that evening, Leanne sat at the kitchen table with fabric samples spread like offerings. She looked up and smiled. Mama, which veil do you like? I sat across from her. I looked at her hands. The same hands I held when she learned to walk. The simpler one, I said. It lets people see your face. She laughed. Preston says I worry too much about details. I said nothing. That night, alone in my room, I finally let myself feel it. Not grief. Not anger. Loss. Not of trust. That was already gone. Loss of illusion. I raised Gideon to believe effort mattered. Somewhere along the way, he decided entitlement was easier. I raised Leanne to believe love was safe. Someone had turned that belief against her. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I called a man I hadn't spoken to in years. Silas Vance. Numbers man. Quiet. Loyal in the way that doesn't advertise itself. I need you to look at something, I told him. He didn't ask what. He never did. When he saw the footage and the documents, his mouth pressed into a thin line. They didn't just plan, he said. They executed. How bad? I asked. Bad enough that confronting them would warn them. That confirmed it. From that moment on, every decision had one rule. No reaction without leverage. I smiled when Gideon called. I nodded when Preston spoke about the future. I listened when Leanne talked about love. Each word they spoke freely became another reason to stay silent. This wasn't cruelty. This was containment. If this were your family, you'd want proof. Subscribe. We've all seen greed. This one crossed bloodlines. The strategy formed quietly. Evidence first. Timing second. Exposure last. I wasn't going to stop the wedding. I was going to finish it. On my terms. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, each one heavier than the last. Silas worked quietly. No dramatics. No raised voice. Just long pauses, a pencil tapping against paper, and a look that told me when things were worse than expected. They didn't just plan to take from your daughter, he said finally. They planned to take from you. He turned the folder toward me. My name stared back in ink I didn't recognize. Those signatures, he said, aren't yours. But they've been used to secure loans. Large ones. I read every line slowly. The amounts weren't reckless. They were careful, spread out, designed to stay unnoticed. They used the estate as backing, Silas continued. If the business failed, the loss would land on you. And Gideon approved this. I asked, though I already knew. He initiated it. I closed the folder. A son stealing from his mother is a special kind of decision. It requires planning. It requires comfort with harm. And Preston? I asked. Silas leaned back. He moved money through multiple accounts. Clean enough to pass at a glance. Dirty enough to matter. How much? I asked. Enough to change how the police respond. That was the moment the situation crossed from personal to public. I thanked Silas and left without saying more. There was nothing else to say. At home, Leanne was tasting cake samples. Chocolate on her fingers. Joy unguarded. Mama, she said, do you think people can start over at any age? I chose my words carefully. Only if they're honest. She smiled, missing the warning completely. I wanted to tell her. Every instinct screamed to end it. To tear the future out of Preston's hands before he could touch it. But telling her would end the plan. And ending the plan would leave her exposed. So I waited. I asked the florist about lilies. I approved place cards. I smiled through conversations that felt hollow. Every hour that passed tightened the net. 3 days before the wedding, I walked into a police station I hadn't visited in decades. I didn't bring tears. I brought files. The officer reviewed the materials quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. This is solid, he said when he finished. We can act. Not yet, I replied. He looked up. You're certain? Yes. I wanted Gideon and Preston calm. Confident. Unaware. Panic makes people sloppy, but confidence makes them careless. They'll be in one place, I said. With witnesses. The officer nodded slowly. Tell us when. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling and counted breaths. Not because I was afraid. Because restraint requires discipline. The next morning, I asked Leanne if I could give a toast at the reception. Her face lit up. Of course, Mama. I want to talk about family, I said. About what lasts. She hugged me. That means everything. She had no idea. Gideon called later, excited. Big day coming, he said. Everything's finally lining up. I let him talk. I let him believe. Every lie he spoke freely was another step toward his own fall. What happens next happens in public. Stay. The final hours stretched thin. Fittings. Rehearsals. Laughter that rang false to my ears. I watched my children move through it all. One honest, one calculated. The weight wasn't fear. It was responsibility. Would you stop it? Or let it finish? I already knew my answer. The morning arrived dressed in white and gold, pretending nothing was wrong. The Thorne estate looked flawless. Manicured lawns. Chairs aligned with precision. Music drifting softly across the grounds. Guests arrived smiling, complimenting the setting, commenting on how lucky the couple was. I watched them take it all in, unaware that they were stepping into a performance built on lies. Leanne was radiant. That part was real. As I helped her into her dress, she caught my reflection in the mirror. Mama, she said gently, you're wearing black. I know, I replied, adjusting the clasp at her back. It felt right. She studied me for a moment, then nodded, trusting me the way she always had. Outside, Gideon stood tall in his tailored suit, best man duties resting easily on his shoulders. He laughed with guests, shook hands, played the role perfectly. If anyone noticed how comfortable he looked, they mistook it for pride. Preston waited at the front, posture relaxed, expression calm. He looked like a man ready to receive everything he believed he'd earned. The ceremony began. I sat in the front row, hands folded, watching my daughter walk toward a future that had already betrayed her. The minister spoke of commitment and truth. Words floated through the air, light and hollow. When the rings were brought forward, Gideon stepped closer. He handed them over with a steady hand. I wondered if he felt anything at all. They spoke their vows. Preston's voice never faltered. Leanne's trembled, but only with emotion. I glanced at the table near the officiant. The folder holding the marriage license sat unopened, still unsigned. That mattered more than anyone realized. The pronouncement was made. Applause followed. Smiles widened. The lie settled into place. At the reception, glass walls reflected laughter and movement. Tables glowed under soft lighting. Music rose and fell. To anyone watching, it was perfect. I moved slowly through the room, accepting congratulations, offering polite smiles. Guests commented on my dress. Some thought it bold. Some thought it odd. None of them understood. Gideon raised a glass more than once. Preston stayed close to Leanne, a hand always resting lightly on her back, guiding, controlling. I noticed the microphone near the stage, standing alone, waiting. The DJ announced the next set of speeches would begin soon. Leanne leaned over. "I'm so glad you're here, Mama." "I wouldn't miss this," I said truthfully. As servers moved through the room, I caught Gideon watching me. Just for a second. His eyes narrowed, curious. Then he smiled and looked away. Confidence does that. It dulls caution. The minutes stretched. The air felt tight, though no one else seemed to notice. I reached the edge of the room and paused. This was the moment where everything balanced. Would you speak now, or wait? When the DJ called my name, the room settled into polite attention. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversations faded. Gideon smiled at me from the head table, confident, expectant. Preston leaned back, relaxed, already imagining the applause. I walked to the microphone slowly, not to build tension, to make sure everyone was looking. "I want to speak about legacy," I said. "Not money, not property, but what we leave behind when people stop believing our words." A few guests nodded. This was safe, comfortable. Legacy, I continued, is what survives when the celebration ends. I looked at my daughter. She smiled back, unaware. Then I nodded once toward the back of the room. The screen lit up. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. A familiar banquet room. A table. Two men seated comfortably. Then the sound carried. Once the license is filed, her trust folds straight into the company. A gasp rippled through the crowd. 3 million each. Preston stood so fast his chair fell backward. "She trusts me. That's the trick." Gideon's face drained of color. The room erupted, not loud, but fractured. Whispers. Sharp breaths. Hands covering mouths. I stayed where I was. "This," I said calmly, "is what planning sounds like when it assumes silence." The doors opened behind the guests. Several officers stepped inside, composed, direct. "Gideon Montgomery. Preston Thorne," one said. "We need you to come with us." Leanne stood. Slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked toward Preston, looked at him, and removed her ring. "There won't be a marriage license," she said. "There won't be anything else." Gideon tried to speak. No one listened. As they were led away, I felt nothing sharp, only final. I returned to the microphone one last time. "Legacy," I said, "is also knowing when to end a lie." The room stayed silent. I stepped down and took my daughter's hand. This story didn't end with shouting. It ended with truth. And truth arrives fast. Subscribe so you're ready. If you're watching this and thinking, "This could never happen to me," that's exactly when it does. Like the video. Share it with someone who trusts easily. Was this justice or revenge? And if you won't subscribe, comment why. Some warnings don't repeat.